Please, please, don't do it. Davide, don't go there. Stay away from this very controversial topic. When I was in Egypt on this archaeological tour in one of my previous episodes, I found myself on the first day on the bus with all the other travelers, mainly American, Aussie, New Zealanders, and English in the middle 20s, early 20s. And we had this young archaeologist who was also our tour guide. And on the first day, we arrived the previous night, they put us on a private bus and they took us to visit the plateau of Giza, when the pyramids are and the Sphinx is. And the tour guide, the archaeologist, reintroduced himself, but most importantly, he set some ground rules. And he said, we are coming from different countries and we have different set of beliefs. And it's important that we are respectful of other cultures and other set of beliefs. And we are gonna spend together something like 18 days. So I wish you a fantastic time. I'm sure you will have a lot of fun, but I only have to ask one thing. And the one thing I'm asking is that for the duration of the trip, we avoid talking about three topics: religion, politics, and sex. And at the time, as the bus was driving to the busy streets of Cairo, everybody nodded and he saw that it was a fair compromise. But from the back of the bus, a French traveler stood up. He walked in the middle of the bus and he said, no, I'm sorry. I'm on holiday. I'm paying for this vacation and you will not dictate me what I can talk and what I cannot talk. And I'm not avoiding talking about politics, religion, and sex. Because if you remove these three topics of conversation with men and women, what are we going to talk about? And everybody started laughing and burst into a very loud clap. And the tour guide knew that he was in trouble with this particular traveler and with this particular group of people. And as a matter of fact, it turned out to be right, because this French traveler living in London by the name of Alex proved to be an unbearable ass. And one day I might tell the story of Alex in Egypt. But for now, this is the point. Because what I'm gonna talk about today, in my own way, is politics, international politics. Because I want to talk about China and Taiwan. Trouble, trouble, trouble. I feel this red light pulsating behind me. Okay? And let me say this. I am pretty sure. I want to clear the air. I'm pretty sure that if China was running a referendum among its citizens, asking them if they should take Taiwan with any means, including force, I would expect the yes to win overwhelmingly. And if a referendum was run in Taiwan, asking their own citizens if they were willing to give up their political system, their economic system, and to be fully reunified with China, you most likely would have a resounding no. But that's the issues at the core of this topic. You wouldn't have a referendum in China because asking their own citizen what is their opinion is not part of the political system. But it is in Taiwan that last week just had the election. And I understand there is politics, there is corruption, there is money, there is hidden interest. Yeah. I'm coming from Italy, I've seen it all. But all this to say that I visited China many times and I visited Taiwan many times. There are two countries to me within one culture. And so the people from Singapore that are Chinese in background, they see themselves 100% Chinese. But that doesn't mean that they want to be part of China. And the same was true for my friends living in Hong Kong and from Hong Kong. But I want to stress this. I go through life like the child on the beach who's trying to fill his bucket with the ocean. You have to excuse my insurmountable ignorance and the fact that within that ignorance there is a veneer of knowledge that, depending on the topics, gets deeper and sometimes is very superficial. And yet, I know about a lot of topics. I'm very well traveled, I'm very well read, I'm very well educated. And so, without offending any Chinese from China, and without validating any Taiwanese Chinese from Taiwan, I am clearly stating that from where I see it, my experience is that we are dealing with two countries. And if one wants to conquer the other one and the other one doesn't want to be conquered, and you can't find a diplomatic solution, the only solution that you might have is the use of force. And when force is deployed at the scale of an outward war, you find yourself that the first victim of war is obviously the truth. But at some point, in the midst of all this discussion, I find myself on the mountains in the middle of Taiwan, taking the tea ceremony with a tea mistress that was the widow of a Japanese tea master that set up his plantation of tea on the hills next to the big mountains of Taiwan. And you know, I find myself sitting on this little bench. There were other 4 participants in this ceremony, and this mistress came up, dressed up in a kimono, traditional dress, silk, and she was really austere. The lights was down, there were some candles, and there was a little flame ready to go with a clay pot that I understood was the pot of water that soon will be used for the tea ceremony. And in one of my personal experience in dealing with Americans abroad, you found the loud and dismissive Americans that travel with a mindset when nothing beats America, and this is just a vacation for them, but America is best at everything. And so even when they have a good time, they are dismissive of what they're witnessing and experiencing overseas. But then you have the other Americans. You can show them a piece of poo coming from Pompeii, and they feel exhilarated. Oh my God, would you believe a 2,000 years old piece of poo that survived the blast of the Vesuvius? Guys, it is poo. Okay, so now, in the case of this ceremony, the Americans that were sitting next to me belong to the part of the Americans that find everything from overseas incredibly extraordinary and wonderful and superior. So the first things that the mistress asks us is, what tea do you want to take on the tea ceremony and this class about tea? And everybody says like, you decide, what do you think we should do? And I says like, well, is it possible to have a little bit of an explanation about the different type of tea? No, she immediately replied. You can either pick green tea, or black tea, or red tea, or white tea that we grow in our plantation, and I will only talk about one tea because we're gonna do a wine tasting, and I'm gonna explain to you the tea whilst you are drinking. It sort of made sense, but the Americans, they all look at me and they say like, of course, what you're gonna ask this type of question, you have already upset her. It seems to me that she might be upset all her life, including when the husband was alive. So we opted for one variety of tea, for which Taiwan is very famous, and that particular plantation was famous, and that was oolong tea. And so she tried 3 different types of oolong, and she explained to us that the jar made of special clay had collected spring water for a nearby waterfall, and that she kept all in these jars, and so they sort of mature, and then they are boiled at a specific temperature in another vessel on the open flame. Then they let them cool down, and they change and move into different vessels. And she served with plenty of explanation the same tea 7 times. And so the first cup was basically warm water. Then the second cup, as she added more water to the teapot, was still watery, but not as much. the third cup, oh, you starting to get an aroma that was like nothing I have experienced in tea. And then we had the fifth cup and the sixth cup, up to the 7 cups, when the tea has started to turn a little bit bitter. And so we could really tell the difference of the same tea as more water was added. And he was like, wow, how fascinating. But then she did the whole same process with another oolong tea. And as we went through the 7 cups, well, to us made no difference between the previous tea and this tea. You know, imagine tasting the same wine with different vintages. Unless you are a sommelier, and many of them get it wrong as well, you know, it's impossible to tell which one is which, or if there is any difference, because also you are not comparing cup number 4 of the previous tea with cup number 4 of the second tea. And this process was extremely slow, with water pouring and water boiling and water setting at the right temperature. And then we came to the 30. How long again? Okay, let's do it. Oh, can you tell the difference? And as we were interrogated on like, what do you think is, you know, the flavor? I remember at some point he says like, oh, this tastes like honey. And she was pleased, not that she smiled. But then the Americans were too scared to guess. But they were impressed that the tea mistress was pleased with me. But on the following cup, she says like, what about this? And then I say like, this one feels slightly smoky. No, that's wrong. And, you know, and the Americans were confirmed that I was a moron. And in the eyes of the tea mistress, all of us were just vulgar tourists that she was trying to charge to keep going. But it was extremely fascinating, because at the end, she asked if we were interested in purchasing any of her tea that was harvested and grown on this relatively small plantation. And just to give you an idea, 98% of that production that represented the top of Taiwanese tea would go all back to Japan. So it was impossible to buy, but she kept some of it for the Taiwanese elite and for the people who would come to the tea house in the mountains and do the tea tasting and the tea ceremony. That, of course, we were in violation of all sort of rules. And she wasn't offended as such, but she regarded us as Western scum. But of course, we were all excited when we found out that we could purchase the tea we just tasted. And so she said, which tea would you like to purchase? And I want you to know, some of these tea that you tasted today, one batch won the gold medal at the International Tea process. There is like this competition. Oh, wow, that's great. Another of the teas didn't even qualify to go for the international competition because they are pre-selection. And another of the tea that you tasted today is a tea that we have submitted to the international competition of this year, and we are waiting to know if we are gonna be allowed to compete or not. And then, being naive, unaware of the exorbitant price that this tea cost, I immediately thought about my family and my friends. Not really, I wanted to have tea for me when I went back to London, so I could drink and I could impress people, because very much like the tea mistress, I thought that if anybody had ever been through this explanation and their experience, they wouldn't have been able to appreciate the quality of this tea. And therefore I could have just bought quality tea from London, from Harrods. Who cares? I could have got that, right? And so I immediately say, oh, I want 4 packs of the tea that won the gold medal. And the tea mistress looked at me with the tiny slinty eyes, and she said, no, you can't. What do you mean you can't? Yes, you have to tell me which tea you would like of the one you tasted. Number 1, number 2, number 3. I'm not gonna tell you which one won the gold medal, because to me, they all deserve gold. And that was very annoying, because psychologically, I myself fallen victim of this trap that drinking something, knowing that I'd won the gold medal of the tea competition internationally, would probably trigger some neurons differently from the one that has not been allowed to compete. How annoying. And as I bought it, I was never told which one won and which one didn't. Absolutely bizarre and mesmerizing experience, but extremely fascinating. Now, when I went back to Taipei, I was offered the opportunity to go and visit on the hills outside Taipei a very special kiln that does porcelain in the old traditional way of the Chinese from mainland China. Because when Chiang Kai-shek left mainland China, defeated by Mao Zedong, and moved with his troops in Taiwan, he brought himself everything that he could be salvaged of historical value from China, but also all sort of artisans, all sort of experts, all sort of people that knew the tradition follow him in Taiwan. And you know, the National Museum of Taipei is the most incredible collection of Chinese artifacts. And it's fascinating that obviously is one of the contentious, but China is convinced that he will get everything back once Taiwan will be reunified. But in reality, it's also true that China went through the Cultural Revolution, where everything traditional had to be destroyed. Anything bourgeois had to be destroyed. And that include books, musical instruments, but even if place of historical importance outside the Forbidden City, wonderful places that I visited 3 times, and I wish I could visit more times. There was a little mountain where one of the emperors, surrounded by the enemies, committed suicide and he hung himself on this tree. And during the Cultural Revolution, they cut down the tree. And the unfortunate emperor, the last emperor of the last dynasty, found himself trapped in China. And that is a turn of the history where, again, if you find yourself on the wrong side of history, sometimes it doesn't matter if you are a peasant, if you are a soldier, or if you are the emperor. But in this special place, outside Taipei, they were still doing the traditional porcelain with all the traditional material. And that is there that I bought in order to properly enjoy my oolong tea that I bought from the tea mistress that didn't even tell me which tea I got, the winner, the one that would go on that year, or the one that has been rejected. From that kiln, I bought myself 2 incredibly expensive Chinese cups to enjoy the tea in the best form. Now, this is what is known as imperial yellow or Beijing yellow. Yellow as a color in porcelain was only allowed to be made for the imperial house. Nobody could have yellow porcelain made because it goes back to the tradition of an early emperor in the 3rd millennia BC, called the Yellow Emperor, a mythological figure that is still very much alive these days in China as part of the folklore, as apparently is the emperor who introduced traditional Chinese medicine. He invented the Chinese script, and that he was a winning general and a philosopher that could discuss with all the Taoist philosophers traveling across China. And so this particular cup, in which I have enjoyed tea alone and in the company of some special guests, I would pick one guest and I will say, I'm gonna drink tea with you. I cannot serve you the tea in the 2 cups to 2 of you. I can only drink the tea with one of you, because when you are at my place, I'm the emperor. And if I let somebody else drink from the 2 cups whilst I'm looking at them, I'm the tea master. And I don't want to be the tea master. I want to be the emperor. And I certainly have the title and the right to be within my household. And so I use spring water, mineral water, and then I boil it, I check the temperature, I repeat all the steps, I wash the cups, and then I drink. And you'll notice that there are some fish gently painted on the inside. And this porcelain is so thin that is translucent. And as you pour the tea in this cup, the design of this cup is so sophisticated that the surface of the tea cools down at a much faster rate. So by the time the clay teapot pours the hot tea into your cup and you lift it and bring the cup to your nose and to your lips, and you see this fish like they're alive, floating with the ripples of the tea, you'll never burn your lips because the tea is always at the right temperature, because the open surface that is open up and shallow at the bottom make sure that you always have the perfect temperature of tea. And myself, I only use these cups when I have some special guests, but also when I'm in the possession of some high quality tea. And so, as I go back to the debate, how controversial it might be between China and Taiwan, I just want to remind people that culture belongs to everybody, and how grateful we are to all the discovery that China made, the porcelain, but all the philosophical and scientific discovery that they had in the past, including obviously the gunpowder. And we're looking at the tea, and then I discover this fascinating character and poet that is very famous in China, and that in my absolute ignorance I never heard of him before, called Liu Tong, born around 700 AD during the Tang dynasty. So the Song and the Tang dynasty, the peak of cultural China after the reunification, and a period of peace and prosperity. And he is the one that, together with many poems that I invite you to discover, wrote the first manual about the tea ceremony. Because as often a lot of this culture are circular, and we might think that is coming from Japan, but in reality is coming from China. And it is Liu Tong who wrote the first manual on how to properly set up and execute the tea ceremony. How extraordinary. And in one of his poems, Liu Tong wrote, "Tea is drunk to forget the self." And I thought, how deep, how rich, how profound is this simple line of poetry, where there is tea, there is the way you drink tea, but there is also you, yourself, and you don't want the self sitting on the table with you, drinking the tea. And I feel that if we were all leaving the self aside, and if we could all forget about it and drinking tea, maybe we could have hundreds of years of prosperity for both China and Taiwan, when they drink the tea together And in doing that, they share the common culture, but they forget the self. And this is me, Davide, from the Impertinent Collector, drinking tea as soon as I finish recording.